cool poems. Definitely interesting.
Yeah. And Sadie?
Thank you. So I've always really liked visual art, so I would have to go with Artemisia Gentileschi, the Baroque artist, or Frida Kahlo, a more modern artist, as my favorite female artists.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's good. So many things that I have to also look up and check out. Next is your favorite girl power song. And it could be the one we were listening to before starting the show. Emelie, you go.
I don't know if you guys know Kelsey Lou. I like the song Due West. It's an amazing song. I've been listening to that song lately throughout the pandemic, so yeah.
Cool, I haven't, so I'll have to check that out. Melanie?
I think in English, it would probably be The Man by Taylor Swift. And then in Spanish, it would be Creo en Mí by Natalia Jimenez.
Oh, yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Sabrina?
I'm going to go with a classic female empowerment song, Truth Hurts by Lizzo. Anything by Lizzo, honestly, just gets you right there feeling empowered.
Thank you, Sadie.
Thank you. So I would have to go with Rise is probably my favorite female empowerment song. Definitely a classic inspirational song, but a classic for a reason.
Thank you all. And I have one more question. I don't know, I have to check the chat to see how you're all doing, but the last question is, what's your favorite thing about Women's History Month? Emelie?
Yes. So my favorite thing is just echoing women's voice, especially now in our generation. I think that we're all coming together and actually supporting one another and getting into positions of power that haven't been seen before. So I think that that's one of my favorite things about Women's History Month, that we're just starting to realize our whole progress throughout this time. So yeah.
Thank you. That's a really powerful statement. Melanie?
Yeah, I definitely echo that. I just love the sense of community that comes around during this time. Like, I think it's especially strong, and, you know, seeing all these different events pop up where we're all able to just learn from one another is really amazing.
Sabrina?
Same. I really like that, you know, we do take time to kind of acknowledge all of these women's empowerment and achievements, you know, women of different cultures and backgrounds in different fields. And I especially like that FIU kind of looks within itself, you know, and celebrates us as young women. And I think it's really wonderful.
Thank you. Sadie?
I would have to say the activism and the education are probably my favorite parts. It's really nice to be able to see a coordinated effort for women's rights to happen essentially all around the world, because this is International Women's Day is in this month, and Women's History Month is recognized by multiple countries. I would also say that the educational component is really awesome. I know that a lot of us have sadly had women lacking in our history curriculums or science curriculums and more, and to see, even if it's just like a social media education effort, to really bring light to these important historical female figures, and present day ones too, is amazing.
Well, I'm sure that whoever tuned in is ready to stay with us for the hour. Those were really powerful statements. Thank you so much for sharing. I think you survived the foil round. And now, before I move on to the topic that brought us here today, I want to take a few minutes, if you would allow me, to share a little bit about the Office of Global Learning Initiatives and the work we do for our students who are not familiar with us. The Office of Global Learning, and I'm not sure how much you know about us, so let me tell you first. I know when you hear global learning, you think immediately international issues, and you're not necessarily wrong, but it's important for us to clarify that the way in which we see global learning is, or the way in which we understand it is the process of diverse people collaboratively analyzing and solving problems that transcend borders. So with that understanding in mind, we provide GL courses for our students. I'm sure you all know that every FIU student needs to take 2 global learning courses to be able to graduate from the university. Thank you very much. And also, we provide a wide range of programs, extracurricular activities, engagement opportunities for the students. And we're super excited that this month, well, apart from it being Women's History Month, it's also a celebration of global learning. We have our Global Learning Fellowships are open the entire month, so you can apply to receive up to $1,500 in funding to support your research projects or your engagement projects. We also have 2 global learning scholarships open for our students that support their participation in capstone projects, or if they're leading any sustainable development project. And then we also have opportunities like the 2021 Transformation Contest flying. So you submit an artistic piece and then you get DC flying if you win, which is pretty cool. I know, Melanie, you have participated, and perhaps some other of you have as well. So if people have questions, they can drop them in the chat as well. And the Millennium Fellowship, which most of you have completed. I know Emelie's applying for next year. So we just have about 10 events. We have funding and scholarships this month. So we want to make sure that you take advantage of those. The link to learn more about how to connect with us and how to take advantage of these opportunities is go.fiu.edu/enactgl. And I think that's all. I'm going to do all the selling of what we do. I want to get started with our questions. First of all, we need to put this conversation into context. We want to understand what are the Sustainable Development Goals for those of us who don't know that. Melanie, would you be kind enough to get us started and share with the audience, provide some context around the Sustainable Development Goals?
Definitely. So the Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs, are 17 goals set by the United Nations General Assembly in 2015. So you may hear them referred to also as global goals, right? So these are goals that we're working together as a large global community to essentially enact a blueprint, right, for sustainable communities in the future. And these goals are set to be completed by 2030, and they tackle a whole bunch of different areas, anything from gender equality to education to even the environment. And so basically, it's just certain indicators set forth that we're hoping to achieve by 2030.
Thank you so much, Melanie. That's I think, hopefully helpful in understanding where our conversation is going. Our audience, if you have questions throughout, please send them through the chat, and I'll be monitoring those. So how are you bringing the Sustainable Development Goals home to Miami? And which Sustainable Development Goal are you addressing, and how are you doing that? Emelie, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, sure. So my project, the BC Community Project, is tackling the Sustainable Development Goals 11 and 3. So 11 is sustainable cities and communities, and 3 is good health and well-being. So the essential goal of the BC is to utilize bubble huts or garden igloos, and is to create transitional shelters for those experiencing chronic homelessness here in Miami-Dade. The transitional shelters will be utilized for a 12-month period, and through established partnerships and with current shelters, and obviously utilizing the connections here at FIU, we'll be able to provide those experiencing chronic homelessness with access to social workers and medical health professionals to the residents staying at the BC. So obviously this is obviously still in progress. So this is just a goal that I'm trying to make a reality. So essentially, the goal would be to ensure that our homeless communities members feel safe, secure, and have access to an understanding, compassionate community. And very important, obviously, they're practicing social distancing, and they're staying safe, and obviously following COVID mandates. So yeah, that's my project, and that's how we're tackling it.
Thank you. And so such an important topic to address, particularly with the pandemic. So thank you so much for that work. Melanie, do you want to talk to us about what you're doing?
Sure. So my project is called Let Your Voices Echo, or Project L.Y.V.E. And basically it's a project to address issues of social justice through the arts. So to also gather an awareness and an appreciation for the arts. So we host anything from film screenings. Because of COVID, our method has shifted, so we have to rely on online events, advocacy workshops, art making workshops, all these kinds of things to bring community together to have these conversations in the context of the arts. And so we're addressing SDG 10, which is reduced inequalities, SDG 4, which is quality education, and SDG 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Melanie. Sabrina, what are you working on?
Okay, so I worked on Sustainable Development Goal number 5, which is gender equality. And I kind of started my project in conjunction with my position as the president of UN Women. And basically my biggest focus was political participation and kind of career advancement for women. And we were focusing on educating and empowering the women in our community, and especially on campus at FIU, in order to educate them on opportunities, and kind of give them the space and the power to go after what they want. We started a series last semester called Women in Male-Dominated Fields, and we've recently had the second episode. The first one focused on the intelligence community, and yesterday we had the criminal justice system. And basically, we just gave powerful women in these fields the opportunity to share their experiences with our students, and give them tips on how to navigate these systems better.
Perfect, thank you. Representation, right? It's so critical to be able to see, oh, people who look like me or who have similar backgrounds can do this, have done this, I can as well. So thank you. Sadie, what are you doing?
Thank you so much. So my project was called Creating Humanitarian Leaders of Tomorrow. And in this project, I educated about 40 fifth grade students in a comprehensive human rights curriculum last semester, and had about 5 units, 1 explaining what human rights was, 2 addressing actual issues within human rights, which were hunger and refugee crises, and then a small unit on civil liberties and democratic participation, and then a final unit in which they explained how different NGOs or UN agencies address these human rights issues in today's society. So through this, I was really working with a school actually in Tampa. I am from Tampa, and I actually was working with my elementary school that I went to when I was a kid. So that was really amazing. But I was able to use my connections from FIU to have the Millennium Fellows really give me some good ideas, some engaging things to do with the kids. And I also got to partner with FIU's own Model UN team to help teach the kids about public speaking. That was truly an amazing moment. I know the Model UN team uses public speaking a lot, and it was really cool to be able to give back to a community through the team by teaching kids these skills that they'll definitely use in the real world. So as you probably could tell, this is addressing SDG 4, which is quality education, and definitely focusing on the academic impact principle of global citizenship as well.
Amazing, yeah, and I think a really good example of utilizing the networks you already have in place, right? And I think we'll talk more about that, but it can be intimidating for students to think, oh, I want to address an issue, but like, do I have the support network to make it happen? And oftentimes you're already involved in circles and clubs and organizations that can really help you move that project forward. So thank you for illustrating that. Now, my next question is, how did you end up being co-founders and founders and presidents of clubs, and why are you tackling those specific issues that you're passionate about? What is it about that issue that makes it hit home? Emelie, you want to get us started on that?
Yeah, of course. So first, before I start, I'm a transfer student from MDC. I was not involved in absolutely anything, and it wasn't until I entered the FIU community that I got all these resources. So in the beginning of the pandemic, I was working overnight at Miami Marriott Hotel, and I was scrolling through Twitter, you know, what usually young people do at work, and I realized that Toronto has been utilizing bubble huts for hot yoga bubbles, and I was like, there's so many other ways to utilize these bubbles, just like not used for yoga. So I realized, why don't I create a community using these bubbles to house the homeless? I've had this thought in my head since I was 17, but obviously I'm 17 years old. I'm not going to be able to implement it. And it wasn't until I actually reached out to 1U, to the community here in FIU, and I'm Model UN as well with Sadie. And it wasn't if I got these people to inspire me that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do this project. So obviously I reached out to my classmates, my friends, teachers, mentors, and I told them about my idea, and they offered me the resources. And that's how I started. So yeah, if it wasn't just that initial step, I wouldn't have begun. So if anybody's out here has a project, please reach out to your community. Like, they have so many resources that you don't even know about. So yeah.
Thank you. That's so true. I mean, I think there's something to be said about the fact that you had the creativity to also think about how else can I use this product, right? Or how can it help? I mean, I love yoga. I'll be the first one to say that, but can it be also used for something that needs to be addressed in the community? So yeah, that's amazing. Melanie, how do you get there?
So I started my project. I've always been very passionate about education, especially the role it has in young people within the arts. So in 2019, I was selected as one of the Millennium Fellows for the inaugural cohort of the Millennium Fellowship at FIU. And from there, I really, started thinking about, well, how can I, create this project? Like, how can everyone I talked to was like, well, but how do these things connect, right? And so finally, when I did the Millennium Fellowship and I started a project based on the school to prison pipeline, I found that, a lot of people in our community didn't know that that was an issue or had even no idea what the issue was to begin with or how it was impacting us. So from there, I started to rethink, using the curriculum I had learned, what are some ways that I can reframe this issue to make it more accessible for people to understand. And that's where I came up with the idea for L.I.V.E alongside one of my friends. And we basically worked on, getting it off the ground, running to different offices. Like Yeni probably remembers us sitting in her office one day being like, hey, listen, we have this outline, like, what do we do? And so, it's things like that, like taking those steps, like finding those resources, like Emelie said as well, that really led us to, where we are today and making these events and this project a solid project that, we can carry out from just that idea stage. So I definitely say, like, don't be discouraged if you just have an idea right now, like go find ways to make it happen.
Yeah, and I remember, I remember Melanie, you sitting in this same office, and it takes time. And I think that's another message I just want to put really quickly out there before I let Sadie share her experience, that don't get discouraged, right? It doesn't happen overnight. All of the students that are leading these projects, they have been knocking on doors, they have been talking to people, and they understand that change and creating something that is lasting and meaningful takes some time. Sadie, tell us how you ended up, because I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you designed the whole curriculum, right?
I did.
Yes.
And so
that's a whole other level of investment. So tell us about that.
All right. So, the very beginning of the story was honestly me as a student in elementary school. I can remember reading a book. It was called Samantha Learns a Lesson, and it was part of the American Girl doll series. And it was about how she finds out her best friend doesn't know how to read because she was a child laborer. And I can remember thinking, this is tragic, and I would like to be able to get involved. The book ends with Samantha, the main character, giving a speech about child labor and helping to address the issue in her community, and thinking that would be cool to learn more about whatever this is called, which I now know is called human rights. And there really weren't a lot of resources for that. There was some history curriculum, and sometimes we did address human rights issues, but there was never really anything to provide that kind of a curriculum. As I went through middle school and high school, it was basically the same thing. If we learned about human rights, it was in the context of another class. It was in the context of a different social issue. It was never just, let's learn about human rights. And so I volunteered at the elementary school all throughout high school. I volunteered at a museum in Tampa, and I had definitely done a lot of working with kids through the museum and trying to explain, historical issues to them. I realized I could probably work on creating some human rights curriculum as well. And so I really felt like if I had a resource like this when I was in elementary school, it would have definitely changed my life for the better. I really wish there was some sort of a curriculum for kids to be able to learn about these issues, because they can find a passion for them. At the very least, it can broaden their global perspective and their understanding of the world. Even if they all don't, want to become human rights lawyers or whatever, it can just definitely impact how they view the world and how they treat others. And so I realized I could use these experiences to create a curriculum, and I worked with one of the teachers at the elementary school, as well as a few other people there, to really just solidify, the project itself. We designed the curriculum. I knew, again, from my experience as being a student in the American education system, I don't like standardized testing, so I made it all project-based, and so they had to present and explain and create, and it was a very project-based learning idea. I think that really drove the point home for the students, and I think that honestly, my experiences in the education system were ultimately what allowed me to be able to create a curriculum like this. I'm so happy that I was able to implement it well. It was amazing to see kids literally holding maps of this is how I could design the perfect refugee camp, and explaining issues. And we had done these are some videos about life in a refugee camp, and they were able to cite the videos and how this is, the best way to do things. And just seeing things like that really showed the impact was there, and that the need was there as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I I have young children, and so oftentimes I look at, and it starts early, right? The earlier they get exposed to these issues, the more critically they can think about how to solve them. They're so creative. I tell this to everybody, I mean, everybody who knows me, I'm always so inspired by my students, not only because they're passionate, because they're also so creative in solving these problems. And so just think about how much more creative and effective you will be if you're exposed to these issues early on and you have an understanding of how to change the world. So amazing. I'm amazed. I mean, I know all of you obviously, but it's so nice to hear you talking about what you have accomplished. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Global Learning Medallion program, because you're all Global Learning Medallion students. And so you have taken tons of global learning courses, and you have participated in tons of global learning experiences. And I want to know, which of them, what kind of global learning skills or experiences have helped you in this journey as a student leader in our community? Whoever wants to get started on that. And it doesn't have to be really long, so we have more questions, but I want people to understand how can taking these courses or participating in this program help you move your work forward, really.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in. So one thing that I've learned from taking my courses is the power of like active listening and communication. I feel that especially living in this virtual reality that we're all living in, it's really hard to make that in-person aspect and to actually communicate with people. So I feel just letting your classmates and letting your group members know, or just letting random strangers know that I acknowledge you, I'm listening to you. I think it really makes a great leader, and it makes people more prone to help you and to actually follow you. Because let's face it, like if you're just bossing people around, nobody's gonna want to work for you, nobody's going to want to work with you. And it's that actively like telling people that I'm here with you, we're doing this project together. And I'm just gonna like probably shout Sadie out right now. If it wasn't for Sadie's Model UN leadership skills, I wouldn't have felt actually prone to be able and comfortable speaking in public and just having that aspect to be a good leader. It's something that I learned throughout my classmates and through my peers, and especially through my mentors in FIU. So yeah.
Thank you. And I'm glad that hopefully people can see the connections between the students who didn't know each other before, and then they end up finding each other within the FIU community. Melanie, what about you?
Sure. So I just want to say, in terms of the community aspect, like, yeah, it was incredible. When I walked in from a very small high school, my first day, I was so overwhelmed. I was like, I can't do this. I'm leaving. This is it. And so, being able to see how small really the community can be, like you get to meet so many different people through these involvements with global learning and your classes and like all these different activities. Like you really get to meet people in more than one space, right? And then it gets to a point where you're like, oh yeah, I know you and I know you, and like, we can all work on these things together. And I think for me, the most transformative moment, was the transformation contest from the Global Learning Office. So, before that, I went during my freshman year, and before that, I didn't really have an idea of how to make what I wanted a reality, right? Or that the careers I wanted existed, or like any of these kinds of things. And so, growing up and like reading about government and all these different things, it was always in books, it was always there, but no one ever looked like me in the books, no one had my story, and it all just seemed so inaccessible. Like I remember, walking like through the buildings and everyone telling us like, yeah, they're public buildings, you can go in, and I was just so shocked, like, what do you mean you can just walk in there? And so it was those kinds of things that really opened my eyes to like, how important it is to be engaged as a global citizen and to tackle these issues.
Thank you. Full disclosure, I did not bribe Melanie to talk about transformation, but it is open right now. Students can submit their pieces, and are wonderful. And I know all of you know him, Eric Feldman, Associate Director, FIU in DC, amazing resource to our students. He works in partnership with us to create the Fly DC flying experience, where you get to have those moments where you're like, oh my God, I can truly do this. I can be, actually, sometimes I can do the work better than some people that I see around here. So that's awesome. Thank you, Melanie. Sabrina.
So on top of the classes and the feeling of community that, you guys already talked about, what I especially liked about global learning is, when I first arrived at FIU, I was kind of lost. I didn't really know what to do. I kind of was like, obviously I wanted to get involved. I was like, how am I supposed to pick what I want to do or just try out a couple different things. And I think global learning kind of pushed me to go to different Tuesday Times roundtables or, choose a capstone project, like just these little things. And at the end of the day, now that, I'm graduating, I feel like I've done like 6 different capstone projects, but it was because of global learning, that pushed me to even just find one, that it kind of opened all of these other opportunities and all of these other, wonderful things that have just really shaped who I am and shaped my experience. So definitely grateful for that.
Thank you, Sabrina. And I'm sorry, I just know the students so well and I relate to them so much. And thank you for mentioning our Tuesday Times roundtables. I'm glad that it has had that impact. It's every Tuesday at 12:30. Normally in person, there's free lunch, and now it's just like free love for your participation, but a lot to learn, a lot of people to network with and kind of introduce yourself to new topics. So just keeping that out, that there's actually a Tuesday Times roundtable coming on Tuesday about Women's History Month. So you might want to check that out. Sadie, go ahead.
So for me personally, I would say the classes and the community have been the most impactful parts. Being in the global learning classes really does broaden your perspective. It really does help you understand global issues and how they impact people all around the world. And of course, with my project being focused on education, it was really helpful for me to see, so this is how it works at a college level. Now let's make it at a level for 10-year-olds. It was a very similar concept, honestly, to what I ultimately did in my fellowship project. Now, I have to admit, the community has also been amazing. The amount of amazing people, including my fellow panelists and so many more that I have met through this program, is just fantastic. I love the support. I love the help. I love just the being there to cheer people on. Thanks for the shout out, Emelie. I am so glad that you're on our Model UN team. We're so happy to have you. But overall, the community is really a good community, a supportive community, a helpful community. And that's something that I honestly wasn't really sure if I should expect going into this. Was this going to be more like the honors college where it's just a broad, there's a lot of people and you find communities in it yourself? Or was this going to be a tight-knit group of people? And it seems to be more like a tight-knit group of people, which is pretty amazing, honestly. And it's pretty cool to have a community of people that have similar interests to you who are there to support you.
Okay, you're gonna make me cry. And I'm supposed to be hosting this, but thank you for those words. I wanna be mindful of the time and all the questions that I have here, but I think I wanna make sure that I touch on something that I find really important to talk about. And I know you all talked about community and support, so my next question might get a little bit deeper into that. Can you tell the audience, does it look like? What does it feel like? How do you even implement a project when there's a pandemic? So that was all 2020 and still 2021. When there is racial unrest, when there's an election, when there's social and political issues that impact really seriously our communities, your friends, your lives, the lives of the nation. How do you even do that? What is it like to bring about social change when there's so much happening around you? I admire all of you for doing it, and so if you have any secret of what kept you going or how you did that, I'm sure the audience will want to know. Emelie, you want to start?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So yeah, virtual reality and emailing, DMing, calling can only get you so far, sadly, and especially where we're living at. I think it really does depend on how bad do you want to make change and how bad do you actually like helping other people. Implementing my project, especially since it involves being in person and actually talking to regular community members, it's very hard, especially since I need help from the community and a lot of people aren't comfortable with going outside. So it's been pretty difficult in that aspect. But I think the thing that's been keeping me going is probably my community and my support system. My godmother, she's Griselda Elena. She's the advisor at the Honors College. I know everybody knows her. If it wasn't for her, if it wasn't for Yeni, if it wasn't for Sabrina and the Hamilton Scholarship cohort, or my friend Amelie Redala, she's in the chat, I wouldn't have kept going. I wouldn't have felt motivated to keep going either. I think it just all depends on, I guess, where you want to be in life and how big your heart is. And especially now we're living in the pandemic, I think everybody needs a helping hand. So that's what's really kept me going. And just knowing that if I get up, if I go deliver these hygiene kits to these people, I'm going to make somebody happy. I'm going to actually connect with somebody and they're going to want to do the same thing to another person. So that's what's really motivated me to just keep going.
Thank you. The impact that you're having. Yeah. Melanie, what about you and everything that was 2020 and things that's still happening?
Yeah, so I think especially, you know, we talk about it in the context of our projects, right, and our work, but also like we're people, right? So we've all gone through challenges over the past year, and you also have to navigate that, right? And taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, like learning to prioritize things. But if you want to make change happen, you make it happen, right? Like it was just said, like it really just depends. And so if there's something I've learned throughout my time as a Millennium Fellow, it's really the power of adaptability, right? You have to be willing to change, and you have to be willing to go with whatever's happening in the moment, because it won't always be what you had planned in that 5-year or 3-year plan that you had set for your project. And so I think that's the most important part of it, right? So not being frustrated by change, not being frustrated when things don't go the way that you expected them to. You know, maybe you get feedback that wasn't what you wanted, and that's good. That helps you grow, and that helps your project grow. So I think that's really what, you know, helped us the most during this time. So I think that for us, it was a matter of really, you know, we had a lot of flexibility in terms of how we were hosting our events with L.I.V.E. And it was a matter of figuring out, well, what space do we want to provide right now? And the space we wanted to provide wasn't a teaching moment in that moment, right? It with the summer, like all this time that we had, like we didn't want classes, we didn't want, you know, to be taught. We wanted a space to have community and to really be able to, you know, bring up these discussions in a healthy and productive and honest and safe way. So that's how we started shifting our project. So we started having those movie screenings where we would screen a movie and, you know, just talk about it. Like, how is this relating to what we're going through right now? Like, you know, why is it that, you know, this is important? How are you just feeling as a person? So that was really what we took. And I think the arts are very cathartic way of doing that, so that you can release, you know, that into something that you can visualize, and, you know, it becomes a concept. So that was definitely that. And, you know, tapping into resources, like we hosted a film screening collaboration with Global Learning about having conversations across political divides leading up to the election. We also hosted an advocacy workshop in conjunction with Honors Votes Week, which was super cool. So, you know, making those connections and forming those networks, and just, you know, being resilient, I think, is ultimately the most important thing.
Yeah, thank you, Melanie. Sadie, I'll let you share how was it for you.
Well, it was certainly challenging because my project was addressing education, and education was one of the main things that went online and really was struggling during the pandemic. Now, and honestly, overall, the project itself felt a lot more meaningful, in my opinion, because in this project, we were really educating kids on the issues that were being seen at the forefront of society in 2020. When doing the Hunger Unit, they were literally learning about how food banks in Tampa, in Miami, all across Florida and the United States were struggling to get donations. For the refugee crisis, they were learning about how now in the future, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee wants to design refugee camps with the shelters being 6 feet apart, and how they had never thought about that before the pandemic, but now this is something the real UN is considering, and it's something the kids were told to consider in their refugee camp designs, which was their project for that unit. And so it really was honestly made my project a lot more meaningful, I think, at the end of the day. I think it really showed a lot of the issues that we were facing in 2020, but also solutions to them. I like to think it inspired people to have a better 2020 after seeing, you know, that there was hope through this curriculum. I do think, though, that something really cool that came from it is now I can say that, you know, this is also good for online classes, because we worked extremely hard to adapt it. I literally, at one point, I was going to send in picture books for the kids that address the different issues, and I couldn't send them in because, like, theoretically they could have coronavirus and I could, like, get people sick. And so it was things like, okay, we'll do a video. Okay, I'll Zoom and talk to the kids. Okay, you know, how can we problem solve? How can we troubleshoot? How can we adapt, like Melanie said? How can we overcome these challenges? And the end product of my project is now a curriculum that could be done in person theoretically, but it could also be done online. And I think that honestly created a more valuable thing to come from my project than it would have, honestly, had it not been a pandemic.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you all addressed my next question, so I'm going to skip it, but it was about sort of how the pandemic surprised you, right? Like the opportunities it presented. And for a lot of students in general, it was also, it provided a different level of accessibility, right? To be able to implement these projects. Excuse me, I just got something in my throat. So I'm not crying because of what you're saying, although you have made very powerful statements that will get me emotional. I had a moment with my water bottle there. And I'm also looking at the time, so we have to kind of wrap it up a little bit so we have time to share the amazing events that we have coming up, and many of which you are going to be speakers and going to be representing your projects. So I want to make sure I save time for that. So really quickly, briefly, before we head into that section, a piece of advice for those students who want to get their initiative started, or maybe they just have like an idea, right? What do they do next? Short answers. Emelie, go.
Okay, go after what you want. You will cry, you will want to quit, you will want to hide in bed and not do anything, but it really does depend on what you want and what your heart desires, because at the end of the day, you want to look back at your time in FIU and say, I did it all, I did everything I wanted, and I have no regrets. And at the end of the day, life is short, and I know we're in a pandemic, and I think that that's what we learned out of this. Life is short, so might as well go after everything you want, and don't let people hold you back. And like how everybody said in the chat, be stubborn, be persistent, keep going. It's gonna pay off in the end. So yeah, that's my advice.
Be stubborn, I love it. Be persistent. Melanie, your piece of advice for the audience.
Definitely. So I would say get started, right? Like if you have that idea, get started. Like don't just leave it as an idea. Talk to people. You know, I'm a very introverted person, so speaking and things like that doesn't come naturally to me. So if you would have asked me 5 years ago that I would be doing this today, I would have probably laughed. So you know, it's the idea of just being able to go out and talk to people, right? So whether it's a friend, tell your friend your idea. That friend might know someone that can help you with that idea. Reach out to a mentor, right? When people tell you like, email me, email them, like go and make that connection. So I really think, you know, the best thing you can do is just go for it, get started, do your research, and don't be afraid to take a chance. You know, there's really not anything that can happen that can be worse than not starting.
Awesome. Take a chance. Sabrina, what are you telling our audience?
So very similar, kind of along the same lines. I recommend just asking for help as well, because I know, for example, like all of us here, we've all done a lot, you know, in our time at FIU, and we have all of this knowledge in our head about all these programs. So if you're interested in something, or if you know you want to do something, you just don't know how to get there, just ask us, reach out. You can connect with most people on Instagram and social media, and you know, everyone will always be willing to help or to give some advice. So definitely just reach out and ask for help, and people will probably give it to you.
Awesome. And we have resources. FIU, many offices that we have the funding, we have the opportunity to advise, and we're looking to be able to support our students. Sadie, no pressure. You're the last one giving a final piece of advice to our audience today.
All right, so my piece of advice would be to plan, and I would say this is kind of a twofold thing. If you have something that you want to do to make a difference in your community, for example, for me, it was the educating the kids in the elementary school, but for you, it might be something different. If you have that kind of a thing, come up with a plan to achieve it. You know, it really sounds like a lot of work, but if you break it down and if you think, you know, this is how, you know, chronologically, this is what I need to do. If you think of it like a story, what are the chapters I need to do to get there? That is a good way to look at the issue, and B, I think it will help you, you know, achieve your goal. My other thing though with the planning is to try finding those resources. There are a lot of resources at FIU. You know, I didn't know the Millennium Fellowship existed this time last year, if I am being completely honest, and yet here I am being able to achieve this project addressing an issue I thought was important for a very long time because of their support, because of global learning support, because of the support of FIU's community of people addressing these issues. So definitely plan in terms of reaching out to people at FIU, reaching out to anyone that you feel like can support you. I reached out to the elementary school. You know, if you guys have something like that, definitely do that, because your plan for your idea, for your project, for your dream will definitely be a lot easier to attain if you're able to do it with others. And so plan to account for them as well.
Also, if I may very quickly, please apply to the Hamilton Scholarship. It is such a good initiative. If you have dreams of being in DC, please do it. Eric will send you the link in the chat. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I think that the overall message is reach out, connect with people. And I think, Sadie, I love that last piece of, sometimes I talk to students and they're like, I want to implement this project, but like, I don't know any place that will be, yeah, if you went to elementary school here or college, you transferred from Miami-Dade, Emelie, like you have places that you can go back to where there's some connections there that you get started somewhere, right? So I think that's a good reminder. I am running out of time, so I want to make sure, first of all, to say thank you so much for being here today. I hope people agree that this was a spectacular launch of, Women's History Month and a way to honor all the women that have come before us and that will come after us and that are doing the work with us. So I want to make sure that I have a few minutes left to share all the events coming up. So if the slides can come up for us, we can talk a little bit about what we have coming, but also thank you for being here, for sharing so much wisdom. I can't believe how young you are and how smart and creative and humble you are. You know, you inspire me, and I'm sure you inspire everybody who joined today. So for our audience, before we go, celebrate Women's History Month. I think I mentioned the Women Leaders panel earlier when I opened up the show, but these are the details on who's going to be participating and how to sign up for it. And also, so this one is hosted, it's being led by the Women's Center, but we have two other ones here, the Thursday Thoughts, Dream Jobs and Life Advice. And oh my God, Sabrina's going to be moderating that one. And so that one is being hosted by the Honors College. And we also have the Women Across Generations. Sabrina, again, is participating in this one. So very active, I think it's also because you're graduating, trying to give back as much as you can and share those resources. So I appreciate that. But please know, if somebody can drop that link in the chat, that the Women's Center has prepared, like, I think there's an event every single day of the month that you can take a look at. Like that was, again, obviously, Nashira Williams and Cindy Brewster, they're amazing. And the students that work with them are amazing. And they really put together a fantastic lineup of events. If we can go to the next slide so I can make sure that we also talk about the community cleanup for the BC project. Emelie, tell us really quickly, what's that about?
Yes, so we're going to be going to Richmond Heights, Overtown, Liberty City, and Opelika. We had our last one on February 20. We're going to be going into the communities, picking up the trash. I don't know if you guys have heard about the evacuations of 10 City. So we're obviously going to be talking to the homeless community and ensuring them that they have a support system on their hands that's not going to be harming them. And we're going to be making sure that their areas are clean and safe away from COVID. So yeah, please sign up. It's an amazing event and you will get hours, I promise. And yeah, it'll be great.
Awesome, and you get probably Global Learning medallion points for going. And next, I have an alumni panel happening on the 31st, and it's the closing of our Global Learning celebration this month. It's earning your medallion, endless possibilities away, because that's how corny we are. Excuse us, but we have amazing alumni coming back. We have alumni working at Google, working for the Development Bank, Radical Partners, doing all kinds of different things, including Pierina Anton, who recently got the USAID, yes, you all know her, Payne Fellowship. So it's going to be a really interesting panel on getting perspectives about career path that you can take after you either participate in a Global Learning Medallion program or the Honors College. So I invite you all to register for that one. And I know I maybe have one more minute if the Office of Engagement production team doesn't kick me out yet, I think I have one more opportunity to share, maybe just two. These info sessions are for students who are interested in applying to our scholarships and fellowships. Please go, hang out with us, learn what we have to offer. We'll help you figure out how to be a competitive applicants for these funding opportunities that we have coming up. And it really makes a difference when a student wants to bring about social change and they have support so that then maybe they can work less hours or, you know, balance other family responsibilities that they have. And anything, as I said, that has to do with this month celebration is go.fiu.edu/enactgl. And lastly, follows. I think Emelie or Sabrina, somebody said, just DM people. You can DM us, we'll reply to you. At Go Global FIU, also visit our new website. We spent a lot of time making it inviting and user-friendly and appealing. So if you don't like it, don't let me know because it'll break my heart. But if you do, just email me and let us know if it's easy to find everything that we've been trying to make available to you. I think that's all I have to share. A huge thank you to our speakers, a huge thank you to the Office of Engagement for having me back and welcoming our students. And I hope you have a fantastic day, fantastic afternoon, and that you really participate and enjoy all the other events happening for Women's History Month. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much for joining.
Bye.